And we're finally here, 40th episode, last in the 4th season. A compilation video will follow soon. For now though, let's see what I've prepared for today. Museum Madness is an educational point-and-click adventure game set in the Natural History Museum. But before you click away or jump to the next title in the video, let me assure you that it's actually pretty good and can be a great title for kids to learn some useful and accurate stuff and hone their problem-solving skills while having fun in an attractive-looking game. Story-wise, someone sneaked into the museum and mixed all the exhibits, causing the titular museum madness. So, it's up to you to restore things to how they were, and solve the mystery behind it all. For the most part, the game plays like any other adventure with a simplified interface, that is. You do not have a list of actions that you can perform like in most other games in a genre, but each item or character, when hovering a mouse over it, will have a certain single action assigned to it. The game's focused on educating, so you will learn a lot in it, or a little bit about a lot of different subjects to be precise. You know, it will go wider and not taller, so to speak. So, even if you're not a kid and someone who likes learning new things, there may be something for you in Museum Madness. From astronomy through mechanics all the way to the history and everything in between. The variety of subjects will not disappoint. Each of the 25 mixed-up exhibits offers a different challenge and puzzle, and you can attempt them in any order you'd like. You're accompanied by Mick the robot, that offers his advice and hints all throughout the game. It's not necessary to use him, but you have the option to. Museum Madness is a surprisingly deep and well-written title that perhaps may have been directed at teens content-wise, but given its approach to puzzles and curiosities it teaches, it can easily be enjoyed by a much wider audience. Mystical is a top-down, humorous, vertically scrolling arcade fantasy shooter. You're a magician, or wizard actually, cause magicians spry on obliviousness of his witnesses to trick them into thinking that he's doing impossible, while a wizard like Gandalf, be it grey, white or purple, either of the three, channels magic through his spells to quote-unquote really do the impossible. Stuff like freezing a lake, hurling fireballs or instantly baking a raw pizza. So yeah, you're one of the latter. And you travel through 12 levels from the Marsh of Eternal Stench, amazing name I must add, all the way to the Garden of Eden, going through hundreds upon hundreds of fantasy-themed enemies, monsters, knights, monks and sorcerers alike. I can't tell you why, cause I don't know, but for whatever the reason they're all bent on stopping you. And when they touch you, you die. So it's a bad touch, I suppose. You're far from defenseless, however, and you can zap them with your magic wand, occasionally picking up various items, potions or even scrolls to acquire new magical powers, stuff like firebolts or genie assists. From time to time, you face one of the few bosses. They are not overly difficult and a nice break from constant upward traversal. When you complete all the stages without dying, they loop around from the first again at an increased difficulty. Mystical looks pretty decent for EGA and can prove quite fun for 1 or 2 playthroughs, but I wouldn't say that it has any serious staying power, and I don't see it being a permanent feature in your arcade games rotation. Motor Mash is kinda like Micro Machines, just not micro and in sorta 3D. It originated on PlayStation before being ported to PC, so there should be no surprise that even in top-down games some form of 3D was used. It was, after all, the it of late 90s. The game is divided into 6 worlds of 8 tracks each, but they are not all available from the get-go and most have to be unlocked by advancing in the League game mode. Each of the worlds is unique, and not only in terms of its design, but also in additional gameplay mechanic modifications. In the Amazon, for instance, you're not only racing on tracks, but also on the treetops, and in the city, you also traverse on the roofs. So, while these may be small differences, there are few of these in each world, and they all add up to a differently feeling experience. There's also 12 different drivers to choose to race as, and each of them has a uniquely looking and slightly different performing vehicle. And finally, there are 6 different racing modes. Single player, which is the same as in any other racer, practice, that too explains itself quite well, knockout, which is a series of runs in which you earn points to participate in the forthcoming rounds. Each position is scored and you have to earn as many points as possible to carry on and not fall off. League is the main single player mode. You start in the 3rd division and race your way to the top spot in the 1st. And this is the mode where you unlock new tracks. Beat the Clock is your typical settle up record mode, and there's nothing special about it. And last and final is Team Play, which is basically same as Knockout, with a difference of there being 2 teams of 2 racers each. Naturally, as with most games like Motor Mash, it's most fun in multiplayer, and that's how I would recommend approaching it. I mean, sure, you have to unlock all the stages first, but when you do, I see no point in ever playing the game in single again. It's best with others, and that's how it should be experienced. Motor Mash's graphics and sounds are not bad, even if display is low res only. That said, PC was more than capable of holding its own in high-res 3D by 1998, so I would really prefer it having been raised to at least 640 by 480. To summarize, Micro Machines, it is not, but it's pretty decent in its own right, and good fun if there's more of you playing. Mr. Blobby is a remake of SNES's Super Troll Islands, exchanging the original troll protagonist with Mr. Blobby and his family. I suppose, cause I'm not sure. It's the first time I hear of him. Apparently he was a TV character that was quite well known in the UK in the early 90s. I've never heard of him, so I can take the game for what it is only, with no nostalgia influencing my view of it. Mr. Blobby is composed out of 60 levels in which you have to color in enough of the screen by walking over it to progress. You start with 3 characters at once, Mr. Blobby, Mrs. Blobby and Baby Blobby. Amazingly creative names. I mean, whomever created the show must have been a genius. Could you ever came up with something as deep, well-fitting and kid-friendly? I don't think anyone else could. Wow! Silly names aside, you can switch between them at any point at will, and you only lose a game when all 3 of them are out of lives. Most of the enemies that you'll encounter are very similar to one another, and they feel rather unimaginative, following the pre-programmed paths, never straying from them even by one step. You can defeat them by throwing limited in number cupcakes, but in reality most could just be avoided as they don't actively chase you. The level design is a bit more interesting than anything I've said to this point, though not enough in my opinion to guarantee spending a lot of time with this game. After all, what do you get if you replace bits and pieces of an already rather mid game with even worse ones than the original were? You get Mr. Blobby. Mess of a platformer that's sadly not very fun to play, and it's entirely understandably obscure. It just didn't deserve any real recognition. Sometimes, more is less, you know, and I would gladly see Mr. Blobby losing 40 of its 60 levels if the gameplay and design were all there and if it was at least a little fun to play. Murder Makes Strange Deadfellows is a detective mystery point-and-click adventure game. Short of the game, but I'll get to that soon. You play as Nick Steer, and you're along with your family at the will reading of your great-uncle Randolph Steer. When it's all done though, you learn from a friend of your late uncle that there's apparently a newer version of the will somewhere in the house, and that the death may not have been an accident at all. So naturally, being the truth-seeking fellow that you are, you decide to do both. Find correct will and figure out if Rudolph's passing was really an accident. I mean, the title of the game kinda gives a lot away, doesn't it? Murder Makes Strange Deadfellows, which I will call MMSD from now on, cause it's just way too long to keep repeating. And it is a lot like an interactive book kind of a game, with a very limited interactivity. It's basically a series of comic book-like graphics with some decent voiceovers, and you can from time to time pick which room to go to observe a story sequence playing out when you get there. The game is not linear at all, and you can visit rooms in any order you'd like, but it's timed, so you can't do it endlessly. In the end, very limited gameplay in MMSD, along with repeatable graphics and slowly emerging rather average story, make it a dull experience. I mean, the idea was there, and it could have been made into something fun and unique, but MMSD ended up being just a slow book that you listen to, watching the same pictures all the freaking time, cycling one after another. And worst of all, you're not having much fun constantly wondering when you'll be able to make another single click to push this whole boring ass train forward. And the answer is not soon enough. Mutan Zone, yes, Mutant and not Mutant, is an arcade action game with a terrible, awful, disturbingly ugly presentation. And I know there was a time when CGA was the best PC could do, and I understand it all, really. It just doesn't mean that I can't hate it. I mean, as limited as the EGA was, it allowed for so much more. The colors could be mixed to create an illusion to there being many more of them, and some games could even straight up look like works of art, with talented graphic designers at the helm. CGA? Well, it either looks bad or really bad. Nothing else really. So, since you know my take on it, you can go to town in the comments below if you feel like letting me know how wrong I am. I can take it all, I'm sure of it. And if not, then know that you just made an old man cry. Not that old, but you get what I'm on about. Anyway, cause as usual I'm on everything but not the subject I was supposed to cover. Mutant Zone is composed out of 2.5 arcade sections. First 1.5 starts off in the first-person view, that's that half I mentioned by the way, and sees you shooting incoming enemy ships. Each of the kills awards you 1 extra life for the remainder of the gameplay. Interesting mechanic, I gotta give it that, but there's a reason for it too. Well, we'll get to it in a minute though. Then the remaining whole one from the initial 1.5 sees you platforming from left to right, shooting or avoiding any and all enemies. And truth be told, the enemies come at you so fast, regardless of how that sounds, that if you don't memorize their approach patterns, you will keep dying and losing the game. Time after time. And that is why Mutant Zone throws scraps of extra lives at you first, cause it knows that it's over the top demanding. It's not bad per se, let's make that clear, it's just unfair. Which is another of those game design scenes that I like to complain about. Whatever. The second part of the game is side-scrolling too, this time not platforming, however, but flying on a hoverbike fighting enemies. If you complete this section, you'll win the game. But don't worry, you probably won't, as it's even more difficult than the platforming part was. To summarize, Mutant Zone, without the T, looks bad, sounds terrible, and plays unsatisfyingly. Exactly how I'd imagine an early CGA arcade game. Mutant Earth is a sharer action platformer that on the first glance appears to be surprisingly similar to Duke Nukem 2, to the point that the main character sprite looks nearly like a palette-swapped version of the original. But then you move it and all the similarities dissolve in a second. The animation is terrible, it lacks frames and looks rather stiff. I mean, the main character doesn't even move his legs or bend his knees while jumping. And yes, you're right, Mario didn't either, but Mario was a good game, you know. And you can excuse a lot in a good game. Anyway, well, the graphics and sounds are pretty good, not necessarily good for 1997, but decent overall speaking. Gameplay definitely lacks polish. It could have easily spent an extra month or two cooking before being served as supposedly ready meal. I mean, stuff like some enemies being too short to be shot even if you duck, or your character getting stuck in the walls, is not something you wanna see in a seemingly complete game. And yet, it's not unusual to find in Mutant Earth. All that said, it's not really a bad game. There's an idea here, and with a bit more time, it could have been better fleshed out. There are obviously numerous different enemies, weapons, item pickups and access cards opening locked-off passages, you know, your typical platforming fare. You play as Rock Tempest, a post-apocalyptic nuclear destruction survivor who wants to emerge to the surface from the supposed safety of the underground, only to find an aftermath of destruction on the way there. Mutated creatures, all bent on killing anything and everything that comes their way. Shower version only came with one level and multiplayer mode, and the whole game was unlocked with a purchase. Would I recommend Mutant Earth today? Well, I would, but only as a learning tool for both. How to not release games and how to survive in the post-apocalyptic world. Mystery of the Mummy is a real-time mystery adventure game that places its focus on detective work more than the inventory puzzling. In fact, most of your time will be spent analyzing clues and talking to various people. The gameplay is entirely non-linear too, not pushing you in any particular direction, and it's always up to you to pick the order any of the 186 locations available in the game you'll visit next. Now, it may seem like a lot, and it really is, but if you're careful at what you do, you should be able to figure out more or less what path to follow, with some dead ends along the way, as these are naturally unavoidable. Not everyone that you'll talk to will be willing to share useful information straight up, so you may also need to figure out how to convince them to help you. All that said, Mystery of the Mummy kinda keeps you grounded, treating you like a real person, in-game even. So you have to make sure to do what you would in real life, so sleep, eat or fill up on gas if you're traveling a lot. These require no special skills or progression, but take time and money, and both of these are a limited resource. I know that I've been talking for a while now, and I still said nothing about the story. I'll try to fix that now. Mystery of the Mummy is set in Hamburg in 1912, and you play as a detective, who along with his work partner Willem, has to solve a case revolving around the mummy and its alleged curse. And like I said, you can go about it in any way and order you'd like, provided you manage to solve the case within a week. Because after that, your superior will ask you series of questions regarding it, and only if you answer them correctly and provide evidence to support your claims, you'll win. I played a very similar board game to that some time ago with a buddy of mine. I mean, there was no mummy in it, but the rest was near identical. There was a case to solve, time limit to do so, non-linear gameplay, and after a week you had to be ready to prove that you solved it. It was called Detective, a modern crime board game. And that's as much unsolicited information as I will give you about it today. Mystic Midway Rest in Pieces is a very simple game. It was ported from CDI, and that kinda explains the simplicity. Not that I'm taking a jab at the CDI owners, but you know, I kinda am. But it's only cause I never either saw one, and I'm jealous. The reason is irrelevant though, a job is a job is a job, and that's as good one as I can make, so I'll get back to talking about the game itself. So, Rest in Pieces, while having an incredible title for a puzzle game, is actually a shooting gallery. Sure, it's B-movie/horror themed, which is always fun, and even has a demonic host appearing from time to time and other undead themed creatures too. But shooting gallery by 1994 on those? was not a genre that could move any serious numbers in sales. I mean, I'm not surprised, I was definitely past shooting unanimated objects moving from side to side, but for whatever the reason, devs thought that the digitized characters and cringe host gimmick would be enough to sell the non-sellable by then formula. Whatever, it is what it is. And you play Rest in Pieces same way you'd do any other shooting gallery game, so you aim at various objects appearing on the screen or moving horizontally, and when they're shot, you get points. Naturally, you have a limited time and ammo per stage, and your goal is to hit as many targets as possible to amass the most points. Each stage requires a certain number of them to complete, and levels will get progressively harder as you go through more and more of them. But you won't, as Rest in Pieces is not very fun. Worst of all, you don't even get a crosshair to aim yourself, but shoot from the bottom of the screen as if it was 1985. It's just not my cup of tea. Perhaps you'll find something in it for yourself, but I'd suggest investing time into something better, like a long poop break or having a pint and relaxing, rather than playing this third of a game. Mystic Towers is an isometric action-adventure with some very superficial RPG elements. It's also a sequel to Baron Baldric, a grave adventure that we spoke about a few months back, in which the titular hero battled his evil sorcerer ancestor. Here you play as Baldric again, he's of age and a wizard. So you know, like Gandalf but more grumpy and less powerful. Not Gandalf the White, not Gandalf the Grey, more in the lines of Gandalf the Moist or Gandalf the Yellow, as whichever the color he wears, it's usually sold after a short while. Anyway, your task as soon as you arm yourself with a comfortable nappy is to clear 12 towers of monsters. Naturally, they're mystical, magical, and deadly. That last one didn't sound that great. I honestly don't know why I've done that. Cringe. Each tower consists of 5 floors of 9 rooms each for a total of 45 rooms overall, 15 monsters and 1 monster spawner. So, obviously you have to kill all the monsters, destroy the spawner, and find the large red tower key that opens the tower entrance. You start with 9 lives, like all cats and wizards do, and you earn additional ones every 10,000 points, which are acquired by collecting treasures. Interestingly enough, same as in previous game, you have to find and consume both food and drink to keep Baldric alive. Not something seen often in action games, but I suppose the devs wanted to double down on the idea. Other than the enemies, there are also traps, some of them damage Baldric, others kill or poison him. Poisoning can be cured by using a spell or by drinking slime from outlets, which is questionable solution at best and very risky at worst, or finally by eating mushrooms, which should not be eaten when he's not poisoned, as then they insta-kill him. There's 10 spells in the game and you can either find them while adventuring or purchase in vending machines. There are 5 damage spells of Ice, Sulfur, Venom Cloud, Fireball and Lightning, so representing elements that they correspond to, and 5 utility ones: Reveal, Heal, Levitate, Teleport and Bomb, with the last one used exclusively to destroy the spawner. On top of it all, there are also 3 power-ups: Meta Power, increasing power of the currently equipped spell, Invisibility, which is exactly what it sounds, and Shields, which is basically a temporary resistance to damage. Now, remember how I initially said that there's 12 towers? I lied. Well, no, not really, I didn't, but I also kinda did. I know I'm losing you, but that's how my brain works, and I had to get it all out. In reality, there's only 6 towers, but they appear in the game in 2 kinds: Apprentice, which is the first half of the game and considerably easier one too, and Wizard, the second half, that start you with no map, stronger enemies, new traps and obstacles, and the red tower key never spawning in the first room. Mystic Towers is a surprisingly fun and complete package of a game, and if you enjoy these action-adventure titles of yours, it's definitely one to keep an eye on. With this 40th episode in our Obscure DOS series, we've covered 400 games. That's not nothing. In fact, that's quite a lot. Sure, not all were great, and there were few absolute stinkers too. This episode is a great example of that, but most were at the very least interesting. What do you think of them though? Were any of the earlier ones or today's interesting to you? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. Smash them if you have to, it helps more than you could ever know. Also, I would like to thank you and all my amazing Patreon and YouTube members for helping this channel keep going. And last but definitely not least, I would like to thank all the wonderful folks who record and upload playthroughs, let's plays and other retro-centric videos here on YouTube, because they help to preserve the games that would have otherwise been long forgotten. So thank you.